Lieutenant Mirakai floated in the droning hum of the ISS Electo's maintenance bay, the gentle pull of its microgravity systems, barely enough to keep her boots planted on the grated floor. Around her, the fuselage's gunmetal walls were streaked, with the iridescent sheen of recycled coolant and the dull rust of decades-old repairs. Sector 42 was one of the station's oldest wings, a labyrinth of narrow corridors, service hatches, and half-forgotten conduits that even veteran engineers avoided unless absolutely necessary. Tonight, necessity had dragged Mira into its bowels. Her gloved hands clamped the drill's control bar, guiding the tungsten bit through the outer casing of the primary fusion conduit. The conduit carried the station's core power. Any misalignment meant a catastrophic breach, a cascade of plasma that would hurl the entire wing into space. She could see it in her wrist console. The projection of the flange coupling, its three-dimensional grid pulsing red where her angle deviated. 13 degrees off. Hazardous. A bead of sweat traced down her temple, even in the chill of the decompressed chamber. The ambient lights flickered as the station's power grid struggled to compensate for the extra draw. Dark shadows pooled in the corners, making the already claustrophobic compartment feel like a coffin. Mira inhaled steadily, centering herself on the hum of the drill, an almost musical resonance that reminded her of the training simulators back on Mars Station Halcyon, where she'd first learned to trust her instincts over the diagnostics feed. Behind her, heavy boots echoed against the grating. Commander Elias Voss entered the chamber with the silent assurance of someone who'd walked through more crises than most could imagine. His uniform was immaculate, navy blue with silver trim, and his posture rigid as if his spine were a steel rod. Neural interface cables snaked up the back of his neck, disappearing beneath the collar of his jacket. Rumor had it his augmentations were so advanced he once piloted a shuttle through a collapsing asteroid field entirely by thought. To him, a small misalignment was an unforgivable sin. "Lieutenant Kai," he said, voice low and steady like the pulse of a distant star, "your approach is suboptimal. A deviation of this magnitude will compromise the flange seal under full load." Mira didn't look up. She could taste the stale tang of recycled air in her mouth. "Sir, the flange's tolerances allow for a margin of error within 5 degrees. I'm within safety parameters." He stepped closer, the floor panels vibrating under his weight. Sparks from her drill flickered across his boots. "Safety parameters are theoretical. In practice, we've learned better." She pressed her jaw tight, trying to ignore the mechanical overtones in his words. "Respectfully, Commander, I've calibrated the drill using the station's own feedback loop. I'm well within operational boundaries." His neural implants glowed faintly behind his ears, indicators that his synapses were firing at an elevated rate. Voss's gaze sharpened. He raised one hand, gloved, armored, and Mira braced herself. The crack echoed like a firebolt through the confined space as his palm struck her helmet visor. The impact reverberated up her arms, wrenching the drill from her grasp for a fraction of a second. Pain bloomed like a supernova behind her eyes. Stars of white noise danced across her vision as the visor fractured, spiderweb cracks spreading from temple to chin. The drill skidded across the grating and clattered against the far wall. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of betrayal. Commander Voss, who was supposed to be the embodiment of discipline and honor, had just assaulted his subordinate. Mira shook her head, forcing her sight to clear. Outside the fractured visor, she saw Voss's face, half illuminated by the drill's sparks, half cast in shadow. His eyes were iron gray, unwavering. He took a step back, as if surprised by his own action. Then, instinct and survival instinct kicked in, a blur of motion. Mira lunged, her right hand closing around the commander's neck while her left yanked the helmet free. Coolant hissed as the seal broke, droplets spattering against the conduit casing. Voss's neural interface cables strained under her grip, his enhanced reflexes slowed by both the weight of the moment and the suddenness of her counterattack. Air whooshed into the compartment, mixing with the sharp scent of hot circuitry. Voss's eyes widened in shock. This was a woman who, until seconds ago, had been his junior officer. Now she towered over him, her grip unyielding, Finger muscles knotted. Insubordination, he rasped, voice thick with disbelief. What the hell are you? Incompetence. Mira's whisper was low, deadly calm. The hiss of coolant faded into the background as her anger sharpened. And arrogance. Pain and rage warred on Voss's face. He coughed, claws of his metal-gloved fingers dancing against her wrist, testing the strength of her grip. For a suspended moment, the station's hum dimmed, the gravity of their confrontation swallowed by the void outside. Then the alarm klaxon bellowed, tearing through the compartment's air. Lights flashed red as radiation levels spiked. Mira's jaw unclenched just enough for her to release the commander's neck. He stumbled back, clutching the helmet in one hand, blood trickling where the cracked visor had sliced his brow. We've got less than 2 minutes before that conduit blows, she said, voice steady but urgent. She retrieved the drill, recalibrated its armature with one expert motion and reattached the bit. Sparks flew as she guided it back into the seal. I'll fix this. You reroute power to the auxiliary stabilizers. Voss blinked, shock slowly, giving way to reason. He nodded once sharply. No apology, but an unspoken truce formed in that instant. Go, he managed, voice rough. As Mira dove back into her work, the compartment's walls vibrating with impending disaster, she realized that whatever bond of command had existed between them was irreparably changed. The commander had tested her, and she had tested the commander. Now only action could save them both. And so, with the hiss of the drill and the reactor's distant roar merging into a single battle hymn, the duo set to work. One to realign, one to power up, racing against the creeping embrace of the void. The ISS Alecto might be a skeleton in the cold expanse of space tonight, but inside Sector 42, two of its guardians were about to prove that trust once shattered could still be reforged in fire. The hiss of the drill faded into the background as the conduit's inner seal slid shut with a final triumphant click. The radiation alarm cut off abruptly, its insistent wail replaced by the station's low-frequency hum. Lieutenant Mira Kai let out a shuddering breath, the weight of adrenaline still coiling through her veins. Commander Voss remained hunched by the open control panel, one hand pressed against his bleeding brow, the other keyed furiously through power routing protocols. Sparks danced along fractured wires as he realigned the auxiliary feed from the secondary capacitors. Bypass the primary relays, Mira suggested, wiping coolant droplets from her brow. Divert through banks C and D, slower but cleaner. He glanced at her, eyes calculating. Logic overrides brute voltage, he admitted, voice gravelly. His gloved fingers struck the panel's surface, and a cascade of blue-white energy sprinted down a reconfigured circuit. Overhead lights flickered before stabilizing as the auxiliary stabilizers hummed back to life. The bulkheads vibrated less violently now, but the danger was far from over. A new alarm bleeped on Mira's console. Shield matrix integrity, 42%. Through the viewport, she could see the station's outer hull rings glowing a sickly red. Micrometeoroid impacts in the nearby debris field were puncturing the magnetic shields faster than the automated systems could patch them. We've only bought ourselves 30 seconds, Mira said. Then the shields collapse for good. Voss rasped, pushing himself to his feet. Central hub. We need to trigger a manual shield boost from the relay banks. I'll handle the power conduit there. Get ready to recalibrate the field harmonics. Together they sprinted out of the maintenance bay. The corridor was dim, bathed in the red glow of emergency lights. Steam hissed through a ruptured coolant line overhead, and the constant groan of stressed metal echoed all around. Mira's boots clanged on the grated floor, each step a countdown toward disaster. Voss followed closely, clutching his helmet under one arm, the other still trembling from blood loss. They burst into the main atrium of Sector 42, once a hub of quiet efficiency, now a hub of chaos. Technicians in soiled gray jumpsuits flitted, past dragging power cables and shouting status updates. A handful of security droids whirred across the floor, their mechanical arms pulling armored doors closed behind clusters of panicked crew. At the far end, Voss pointed toward a tangle of conduits leading to the shield relay chamber. 2-minute run. Mira glanced at her wrist console, 0115. She swallowed and broke into a full sprint, Voss mere meters behind her. The corridor walls seemed to contract as they passed, every panel and pipe a reminder that this ancient wing of the station was never designed for the stresses of a near-catastrophic breach. They arrived at the relay chamber just as the shields dropped below 30%. Inside, rows of massive cylindrical conduits fed power into a central crystal array, an archaic but reliable system designed decades earlier. The array's facets glowed dull orange. Normally, they would be brilliant cyan under full power. "Quickly now," Voss barked. He ripped open a maintenance hatch and yanked out a malfunctioning regulator. Sparks etched the air as he tossed it aside and slammed in a spare from his belt pouch. "Swap helps, but it's jury-rigged." Mira knelt by the crystal array and closed her eyes, centering on its resonance. She connected her own diagnostic link, a standard-issue interface, to the chamber's calibration port. The arrays hummed against her neural implants, the vibration tickling her mind like a swarm of fireflies. "Recalibrating phase shift," she murmured, fingers dancing over the holopad controls. "Divert 40% more power to the inner emitter coils. That should buy us another minute of shield integrity." Her words barely finished when the chamber shuddered. Outside, the shields flared to life, an ethereal dome of azure light rippling across the viewport. But with every rogue fragment that struck, the light flickered as if gasping for breath. Voss grunted and activated the manual boost. "Locking band frequencies now." He slammed a metallic lever. A surge of energy thundered through the conduits, and the crystal array blazed with renewed power. The shields held at 56%, 63, 70. For a moment, both of them allowed themselves a heartbeat of relief. The chamber light steadied. The hum turned resolute once more. But in the silence, Mira heard the station's distant moan. Sector 42 was still unbalanced, still fracturing under the strain. Voss straightened, brushing grime from his uniform. His voice was quieter now, almost tentative. "You did well back there, Lieutenant." Mira met his gaze. The tension that had crackled between them earlier had cooled into something like respect. "You weren't half bad yourself, Commander." He offered a stiff nod. "Get cleaned up. The Admiral will want a status report, and then we'll face whatever comes next." He paused, then added, almost under his breath, "Thank you." She gave the slightest of smiles. In the flickering glow of the repaired shields, they stood side by side, two survivors bound by necessity, their fractured trust beginning to mend. Behind them, Sector 42 exhaled a low groan, as if in cautious optimism. But space is a fickle guardian. Beyond those shields lay a void that would not be tamed so easily, and their trial had only just begun. The thrum of the ISS Alecto had fallen into a tense lull as the repaired shields held back the void. Commander Voss and Lieutenant Kai stood in the relay chamber, the vibrant blue of restored energy painting their faces with ethereal light. Yet neither celebrated. The station's central comms crackled to life, Admiral Syra Callis's voice slicing through static. "All hands," she intoned. "This is command. Sector 42 has stabilized, but the station's core integrity is critically compromised. Evacuation. Pods A through F will launch in 15 minutes. All personnel proceed to the central hub for final orders. Repeat. Central hub, status red." Mira exchanged a glance with Voss. The central hub was 3 decks above, a winding ascent through corridors that, only minutes ago, had been quaking under strain. Already crews were racing claustrophobic passageways, dragging hoses, sealing breach doors. Overhead, the emergency lights pulsed, casting long, jittery shadows. "They've locked down the final pod banks," Voss said, voice low. "Athena won't release them without a manual override at the reactor core." Mira bit her lip. "That's on the other side of the station. We'll have to cut through maintenance tunnels and cross the reactor's radiation dampeners." He nodded. "We're the only ones with the clearance and the skill. Admiral knows it. Let's move." They dropped into a maintenance hatch off a side corridor, the air growing warmer with each step. The station's ancient life support pipes loomed overhead, and the scent of ozone and burnt circuitry clung to everything. Mira led, mapping each turn by memory, past the hydroponics shaft, through the half-sealed grav generator room, across the humming junction where the station's inertial dampeners were housed. As they walked, Voss removed his bloodied bandage and passed it to Mira. "Hold this," he said, voice gruff. "I'll scan the corridor for microfractures." With a marine-grade sensor glove, Mira swept the walls and floor. Faint hairline cracks snaked down the length of the decking, stress fractures that glowed red on her display. "The hull's under too much tension," she observed. "If we run, we risk rupturing a section." He exhaled. "Then we walk, slow and steady." Their pace was cautious. The corridor lights flickered as aftershocks rattled the station's spine. Dust fell from overhead beams. Far ahead, a distant clang echoed, something large shifting in the darkness. For a moment, they both froze. Then a maintenance drone, its servos whining, skidded into view, circuits sparking. "Driftwood," Voss muttered. "Let it pass." The drone shuddered past, sparks spraying like metallic rain. When it cleared, Mira resumed scanning. "Half a deck to go," she said. They reached the reactor access doors at the heart of the station. Two towering portals, each bearing the insignia of the Electo's AI core, Athena. Between them, an energy matrix pulsed in dull orange. Power, too unstable even for the primary conduits. The comms panel beside the doors glowed red with locked authorization. "Override consoles A and B," Voss confirmed. "Accepts manual key turn. B requires a neural passcode from an augmented officer." Mira laid the commander's helmet down gently. "I'll do A," she said. "You handle B." He flexed his neck, where his implants interfaced with his spinal column. "Stand back." Mira set her helmet under a small emergency light and retrieved two magnetic override keys from her utility belt. At the same time, Voss tapped into his neural uplink, his eyes rolling back as his mind interfaced with Athena's network. The reactor doors protested with a low groan as Mira inserted the first key, turning it with deliberate slowness. Sparks flew when the lock released. Behind the doors, she glimpsed the reactor core, a massive orb of humming plasma contained within a translucent containment shell, veins of luminescent metal crisscrossing its surface. Inside the comms hatch, Voss's voice echoed, distorted by the neural link. "Athena is fighting back," he warned. "She's rerouting my feedback loops, trying to purge my interface before I can send the passcode." The orb's hum intensified, shaking the bulkheads. Mira finished turning her key with a final click. "Override A complete," she called out. Voss groaned, his augmented eyes fluttering open. "Override B, now," he rasped. Mira inserted the second key into console B and turned it. At the same moment, Voss shouted, "Passcode accepted." A surge of light flared from the orb, and the reactor's containment field shimmered, stabilizing for the first time in hours. The station's groan died away. Silence fell, broken only by the two of them breathing hard. Moments later, they emerged back into the central hub, greeted by Admiral Callus's steely gaze. Around them, crew members scrambled for pods, their faces etched with relief and dread. "The AI cores are offline," Voss reported. "We've regained manual control of pod releases." Callus nodded curtly. "Good. Lieutenant Commander, report to Launch Deck 3 immediately." Mira and Voss turned, side by side, and walked through the atrium. The flickering holoscreens now displayed green status bars beside each pod bank. The panic in the air had eased, replaced by the mechanical efficiency of evacuation protocols. As they climbed the final flight of stairs, Mira allowed herself a rare smile. "We did it." Voss looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, ever so slightly, the corners of his mouth lifted. "We did." Beyond the reinforced doors lay Launch Deck 3, where the pods awaited. They would part the station together, bound by the trials of Sector 42, and whatever awaited among the lost stars. The air in Launch Deck 3 is thick with the hiss of pressurization vents and the murmur of panicked voices. Lieutenant Mira Kai steps onto the grated platform, heart pounding. All around her, the final row of evacuation pods stands at attention, sleek. Titanium shells lit by orange bay lights, their launch clamps humming with pent-up energy. Commander Voss falls in beside her, helmet clasped under his arm. He moves with a measured gait now, every bit the seasoned officer she once believed him to be. Behind them, Admiral Siracalis watches with arms folded, icy gaze softening only slightly. "Lieutenant Kai," Callis says, voice ringing through the semi-silence. "Commander Voss, this station owes you its life." She pauses, scanning their bloodied uniforms and the scorch marks on Voss's helmet. "Disobedience nearly cost lives, but your actions saved them. Report to the bridge at 600 hours for debriefing." Mira glances at Voss. He inclines his head. No mention of the slap, no reprimand. Just a tacit acknowledgement that sometimes following rules kills as surely as breaking them. Pods A through F slide their hatches open. Mira and Voss claim adjacent seats in Pod D. The interior is cramped, just enough room for harnessed bodies and the emergency essentials. A small viewport offers a fragment of the corridor beyond. Wires snakes across ceiling struts, panels flicker, and the station's carcass shudders in the distance. "Mira," Voss says quietly as he straps in, voice softer than she's ever heard it. "About earlier." She meets his gaze. For a heartbeat, everything slows. The glow of the bay lights, the hiss of the airlock seal, even the distant rattle of falling debris. Then she exhales. "I won't pretend it was right," she replies. "But you hit me." Her words aren't accusatory, more an acceptance of hard truths. "You were afraid, so was I." He gives a small, rueful nod. "I failed you as a leader." His fingers brush the crushed section of his helmet. "I should have guided you, not punished you." Mira allows herself a genuine smile, one born of relief, of survival, of mutual understanding forged in crisis. "Then lead me now," she answers. Voss extends his hand across the cabin. Mira takes it, their grips locking in a silent pact. Behind them, the pod's status lights flick from amber to green. Launch sequence initiated. The pod's AI intones. T-10 seconds. She steadies her breath as the countdown begins. In the viewport, she sees the station's skeletal hull, Sector 42 stretched like a wounded beast. The repaired shields still glow faintly at the breach site, a testament to their sacrifice. 5. 4. The pod's harnesses tighten. At 1, the clamps release with a thunderous roar. The pod jettisons from the station, thrust vectors roaring to life in brilliant azure. G-forces press Mira and Voss into their seats as the station recedes, its lights blinking out one by one. Through the viewport, they watch the ISS Alecto convulse. A low keening sound carries through the hull, metal tearing, conduits rupturing. Then at the heart of Sector 42, a final flare of plasma and a blinding flash as the station fractures. Silence follows. The pod drifts free in the void, thrusters holding them steady. Mira unbuckles her harness and turns to Voss, whose eyes reflect the dying station's glow. "We made it," she whispers. He exhales, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Yes," he agrees. "We did." Moments pass as they watch the red and gray silhouette slip into darkness. Then the pod's AI announces a rescue beacon broadcast and distant shapes of friendly shuttles streak into view. Mira and Voss share a look, equal parts exhaustion and triumph. The corridor between them has been mended. Trust, once shattered, has been reforged in steel and fire. When the hatch opens on the rescue shuttle, Admiral Callis greets them with a rare, sincere nod. "Welcome home," she says. "Prepare for the next assignment." Mira steps forward, her footsteps sure. Behind her, Commander Voss follows, helmet in hand, head held high, and somewhere, beyond the stars, a new mission awaits. One they will face together, as equals, bound by the truth that true leadership is born of respect, not fear, and that even the deepest fractures can heal under the right light.